All right, so after we heard that first reading today, anyone else like me think of Charlton Heston? I mean, come on. All I can get in my head is that picture of he's ascending the mountain, he's got those tablets in hand, there's lightning and clouds. Because all we really need is that suggestion of Moses and a mountain, and that's exactly where we go. I've heard this one, I've seen it all, I know what's happening. And when I first looked at today's reading from Exodus, my mind just started to fill in all of the details of the story from that little tiny snippet of action that we got today. But it seems like no matter how many times I think I've heard this story or of how Moses received the law, and doesn't it kind of seem like we hear it not only over and over again, but it keeps coming. Like, it doesn't happen just once in the Bible, right? I still go back to that cinematic version. And I have to say, I had to read the story more closely before I figured out that the pictures in my head don't actually fit with the place in the story that we're reading today. You see, in today's part of the story, not much happens, at least not in the few verses that we read. It's kind of a story with a lot of waiting. Moses goes up a mountain, he sits, and he watches for 6 days as the cloud of God's presence sort of surrounds him, envelops the entire mountain. From down below, I'm sure everybody's just watching and wondering. Then Moses spends 40 days and 40 nights inside the cloud, kind of chatting with God. That's 46 days, a month and a half. And I'm sure all of the people of God are down there going, what is going on up there? What are they doing? God and Moses together inside that cloud. In actually opening my Bible, I discovered that, in fact, a lot more happened between Moses and God on that mountaintop, if you keep reading. It wasn't just a 46-day time spent, I don't know, chopping up stone and banging away the etchings for the 10 Commandments. They spent those 40 days sorting out every last detail about how to build the Ark of the Covenant, how to build a tent to house it, who should take care of it, how they should take care of it, and even how they should dress when they're taking care of the Ark of the Covenant. Important stuff, right? But that was too much waiting for the people. I mean, hadn't they already heard Moses read every last word from the Law and Covenant? Because we do hear that a little earlier. They had agreed, saying, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. That should cover it, don't you think? As far as they're concerned, they had heard it all before, and there wasn't much more that they really needed to. Tired of waiting for Yahweh to get on with things. Does anyone remember what they did when they got frustrated? They partied and
they came up with the golden.
They built it. Yeah, that's right. They built a false idol. They decided if God's not going to get us moving fast enough, we're going to pick another god. We're going to pick this false idol, the golden calf, because maybe he's not going to dawdle quite as much as God. The thing is, there is always more that God has in store for us. Once the people of God set foot across the Red Sea, they weren't done. They weren't just out the door and, adios, Egyptians. They were starting on a journey with God. 40 years, in fact, that they spent on that journey. And every time that they thought they had seen and heard and experienced all there was to know about God, they discovered there was more. God, in fact, was busy forging a relationship and fulfilling a promise. They were his people, and he was their God. And none of that is small or quick or in any way straightforward. So you know what they had to do? They had to revisit Sinai over and over again, and they had to revisit the words of that covenant over and over again. So here we are. It's the last Sunday in Epiphany, Transfiguration Sunday, a day that our own lectionary has us revisit twice every year. We do it every year on this Sunday at the end. We get different versions each year, but basically it's the same. We also have a feast day dedicated to it in August. That means if we went through one lectionary cycle, which is 3 years long, we could do the Transfiguration 6 times if we wanted to. So, haven't we heard it all before? I mean, what could we possibly have missed by this point? Don't think we're that different from those ancient Israelites waiting at the bottom of the mountain and trying to figure out what on earth is still going on up there in that cloud. At the same time, we are feeling all of that stuff like, I don't think we can afford to wait around and find out. Because, of course, we have to move on to Lent. I mean, it's right around the corner. Wednesday, in fact. Maybe it's easier to be the one on the mountaintop. But if you look at today's gospel, I'm not sure that Peter, James, and John actually feel that way. They've been following Jesus for a long time now. And they've heard his teachings, and they've witnessed his miracles and his healings. And they have stumbled through this long journey of trying to figure out who exactly is this man, what exactly is his relationship to God, and why is it that we are so compelled to follow him? I'm wondering how many times along the way they thought, I don't know if I'll ever figure this out, and I'm still not sure what I'm doing here. Maybe I should just go home to my family. Now, Matthew, in his gospel, gives us the answer to that question, who is Jesus and why should we follow him, in all 28 of his chapters in his gospel. I mean, that's the whole point of his gospel. Jesus is the Messiah. He is the fulfillment of God's promises. But for those disciples, it could have been several years of following and wondering, a long time of being unsure, despite the fact that they were with Jesus day in and day out. Now, Matthew reminds us at the beginning of this today's reading that it's really only been 6 days since Peter started to be able to kind of put into words what he thought he was figuring out about Jesus. He said, Jesus, you are the Son of God. Thing is, Jesus had been showing this to his followers all along. Because Matthew's gospel makes the point that everything that Jesus did and everything that Jesus said from the day he was born showed us that he was that promised Messiah. It's as if Matthew's entire gospel is epiphany after epiphany after epiphany, showing after showing after showing, showing the disciples, showing us what is right there in front of our eyes. Jesus is God come to be with us, to meet us right here in human form, right where we are. So why does Matthew hammer this point home over and over and over again, you might ask? And why? Why did the disciples need the transfiguration? When Peter got it, he got the right answer, right? 6 days earlier. I think Matthew is telling us that we have to keep looking. We have to keep on recognizing and re-recognizing Jesus as the Son of God. Or we'll be tempted to think there is nothing more that I need to know about Jesus. When I was in the UK last month, we visited Lincoln Cathedral at least 4 times. Probably, don't you think? Matthew's shaking his head if you can't see. See, Matthew's mother lives only a few miles outside of town, and it was a great place to go take the boys the first day we got there. Then we met up with family there. The day after that, I think, we went to a service. So when it was proposed by Luke that we go back a 4th time so that we could do the roof tour, I wasn't so sure there was much more left to see. Now, have any of you ever been to Lincoln Cathedral? Matthew has. Oh, and Jane, awesome. Okay, so then you'll know, Jane, it's a pretty cool place. It is built actually right on the side of a mountain. I mean, Lincoln itself, it's kind of, I know, you guys are looking, it's like, you didn't know that. Mountain in the British sense of mountain.
It's all relative.
It's relative. Lincoln, it's kind of like the Iowa of the UK. Lincolnshire. And they built the cathedral right on top of the edge of this cliff, right in the middle of Lincoln. You can get a pretty good view just from standing at street level on the correct side of the cathedral. And you get the same view from the castle wall, which is right across the street. We've also visited that a bunch. Everywhere you look from the edge of that cliff on that hill. It's called Steep Hill, in fact. Try the point home. Needless to say, over the past 2+ decades of visits to Matthew's mom, I feel like I have gotten a pretty good sense of the view from Steep Hill across the Lincolnshire wolds and fens. But I also have to say that, as a mother of a 19-year-old that I just sent off to college, I am not about to say no on one of those rare occasions when he says, "Mom, will you come do something with me?" So of course, I said yes to the roof trip. It was on the day we set out, and we had to reserve, so like you pick the day, you gotta go. It was cold. It was cloudy when we set out, and I'm already thinking crawling through the rafters could be kind of cool, but the view thing, it might end up being kind of a bust. Well, was I ever wrong? Because by the time you get to the end of the tour and you emerge right out onto that roof, and if any of you have been in European cathedrals, which I'm sure a bunch of you had, they have, you can walk everywhere on the roofs. They had to get up there to fix it, is my assumption, but you get out there on the roof, and the cloud cover has completely lifted, and we could see forever. I mean, so much farther than you could see from street level. I imagine I was seeing the English Channel. I don't know if I really was, but I was pretty sure that's what I was looking at. And the other thing is, instead of just sort of looking out over the top of the city from like kind of that vantage point, we were looking right down on top of it. It's like you could see how all of the little puzzle pieces fit together. You know, like this old wall fit together with this medieval fortification, with some Victorian thing that was built right into the piecing together with that really weird 60s hotel that's across the street from the cathedral. It's all kind of put together in layers and chunks. It was amazing. I mean, I have to say the streets of Lincoln, they've never really actually made sense to me because I'm used to cities that are built on a grid, and in all the years that we've been going in and out, it feels like no matter which road we went in on, we always ended up at the exact same parking lot. Who knows how that happened? Well, finally, I understood, because if you stand up there, you can see how it is actually this kind of maze of a wagon wheel, and every last road is taking you right there to that cathedral. Climbing up onto the roof of a building that I had been around and inside many, many, many times over the years gave me a completely new perspective on something that I thought I had seen it all about. I was putting pieces together. I could see layers. I could see the logic. It wasn't that Jesus was transformed into God at that moment. His appearance merely changed for a few brief moments, showing Peter and James and John God's full love and glory that was in him. It was in him all along, and it was clear to see all along. It was just being shown to them in a new way. It wasn't hidden. It was right there. But there was more for them to see. They had to keep looking. Now, if those disciples had gone back to their fishing nets months ago when they were still trying to figure all this out, they would have missed something huge. They would have never quite realized that in Jesus, God was truly right there with them, working to transfigure this world into the world that it was intended to be. I think as Christians, as followers of Jesus, all of us need a regular and healthy dose of the transfiguration. It's the thing that reminds us of this amazing promise. Because every time that we look at the world the way it is, we're tempted to think we understand all there is, to think, it's never going to change. We know how things work. We've seen it all before, and not much is getting any better, really, is it? But you know what? We haven't seen it all. There's so much more going on that God has in store for us. So keep on climbing mountains or rooftops, whatever's before you. Do that with Jesus on a lifelong journey of discipleship. Because there's always another epiphany waiting in the wings, something more that God has in store for each and every one of us.